Hello and welcome to another edition of the Globalistic Transfer Special. All this summer we've been bringing you the ins and outs at both Rangers and Celtic, and today we're discussing Russell Martin's men. And David, just when you think it can't get any more messier at Rangers, Hamza Agaman decides to throw a massive curveball.
Yeah, massive curveball. A really messy situation now, and I think for everybody's sake it has to be ironed out and it has to be sorted out very, very soon. Look, there's loads of stuff flying about. Clearly didn't want to come off the bench the other day. He'll say he was injured. He'll probably still say he was injured. I think Rangers are very sceptical about that. I think everybody is pretty sceptical about that. It was really interesting before that incident. Neil McCann in the commentary on Sunday was speaking about him warming up, and he actually said, well, if you could call it that, you know, he was talking about his kind of the amount of effort he was putting into it. Obviously what happened after that, and look, it has to be sorted out. He's going to leave the club. He's got no future at the club, clearly. I'd pretty say he's finished at Rangers. And Rangers just need to try and get the best deal possible and try and get that away, because it's a circus now. It's a side issue that is going to dominate things until it's sorted out. He's a very talented player, a very good player. I know people who think he might have ideas above his station or he's getting bad advice. I would probably go along with that, because I don't think he's anywhere near the finished article, and I don't think his conduct recently, and I include going right back to the start of pre-season when it was he came back late and it was due to visa issues apparently. I think you now look at what's happened and it makes you question, has his attitude been spot on during this pre-season? I'm not sure it has been, so I think for everybody's sake he's better off out of Rangers.
So you see absolutely no way back after
I don't think there's any way back at all now, Craig. You know, you can, as I said, look, you can go into the he said stuff over the injury and everything. I think the player clearly doesn't want to be there. I would say his advisors would rather he was elsewhere. There's clearly suitors in France. Lille are at the forefront of everything. And look, for Rangers' sake, is he a loss potentially if he fulfils his potential, capable of great moments? Clearly a very, very talented guy, but is he the guy you hang your hat on to go and score 30 goals this season? I'm not sure he is. And if he's going to be having a questionable attitude, let's just say that, then I think he's better off out of the place.
Does it kind of indicate what Russell Martin did in terms of, you know, outing him after?
Yeah, I mean, see, to be honest with you, it's been really fascinating to see the sort of fallout from this, because I think most Rangers fans have serious question marks over Hamza Agaman and what happened. But there's a lot saying Russell Martin should have kept that in-house. But I don't know, do you really blame Russell Martin for it? Because if he's turned to his bench in 60 minutes, and I'm watching the telly thinking, why is he not putting Hamza Agaman on? Everybody's watching the telly thinking that. And the Rangers fans at the game must have been thinking that as well. Obviously, Rangers started without a recognised striker. So if he turns around and Hamza Agaman suddenly tells him, oh, I'm injured, I can't go on, I think there was a bit of passion maybe from Russell Martin after it. Passion, the right word. You know, he was, obviously there was emotion going through, because I think he was clearly irked by what had happened. But you know what? He was going to get quizzed on it. Should he defend him? Should he just say, oh, he's got something? I'm not sure. I don't really think he should. I think he was quite right to basically come out and say what had happened. And people might say, oh, it's self-preservation or deflection. Well, maybe it is, but I still think Russell Martin had every right to tell the Rangers fans what had happened. And let's be honest, it's Glasgow. It would probably come out anyway. So I think I don't have any great... I think he was quite within his rights to tell the world what had happened.
What do you think, you know, that sort of thing does for the morale in the changing room?
I don't think... I'm not sure morale... Look, football players are very... they get on with things, and I don't know, there's so much scrutiny and pressure, stuff like that, incidents like that, it happens. It's happened so many times. You look at other issues just now, down south, you've got a very public standoff between Alexander Isak and Newcastle and everything. Look, players got on with things. I dare say there's probably members of the Rangers squad aren't overly happy with how Hamza Agaman has conducted himself probably in this period, in this kind of saga that's going on in terms of his transfer. I think the players will go on. What it does, as I said, it brings a bit of circus. It brings, you know, in terms of Russell Martin, he should be preparing for a Bruges game without these distractions. So that is just added at a time when he's not really high on strikers, very low on strikers. Then I think it's brought a needless distraction. It's brought an element that he really can do without just now. You know, he needs everybody pulling in the right direction. the same direction. He needs all these players to be on board, and all in, as he keeps saying, and clearly Hamza Agaman isn't that.
Does it change the kind of control that Rangers have in terms of the value that they can now ask for a move, if you like?
Yeah, I think if it was right at the start of the window and nobody had showed any interest, then maybe, but it's clear that there are probably 2 or 3 clubs really keen on him. Lille, as I said, are at the forefront of everything. I think Lille probably believe they're going to get him by hook or by crook. I'm not so sure it does decrease his value. Look, Rangers are still entitled to ask for the going rate, whether it's a loan with an obligation to buy or a straight permanent deal. I think Hamza Agaman and his advisors will know exactly who's in for him, know exactly what they're willing to pay. And as I said for Rangers just now, Rangers do, look, I can see this going right to the final hours of the window, don't get me wrong, but I think Rangers now, the main task, or the only task, is to get the right value for the player, but I just don't see how he's a future at Rangers now.
Yeah, and obviously Rangers have got kind of other striking issues at the moment, but a boost that Cyril Dessers was in training this morning ahead of Bruges.
Yeah, it is a huge boost, and it was really interesting. Again, obviously the Igamane comments, but the other comment that I was quite kind of startled by when Russell Martin after St Mirren was talking about Dessers and talking about his attitude and basically alluding to the fact that Cyril Dessers, if all things were being equal and Rangers did accept a bid, he was more than happy to leave Rangers. It was kind of just the way he said it. He was then pushed on, is he asked to leave? And he said, no, he's not asked to leave, but there's a difference between being willing to leave and asking to leave. But he was talking about his attitude and how his conduct and obviously his experience has been impeccable. AEK Athens were clearly interested right at the start of the window. They might have this lingering interest, Cyril Dessers, on big money. I actually think Rangers should do everything they can to keep him, especially given what's happened with Igamane and especially given Danilo's form. To me, if I was Rangers, I would keep Dessers at least until January and then maybe revisit it. But yeah, look, it's a boost to have him back because he is a goal scorer. I know he has his faults, I know he divides opinion, but if you're watching Rangers without Cyril Dessers, they're clearly better off with him in the squad. Whether he starts against Bruges, I'd probably be surprised given, it looked, to begin with, a nasty injury, and he's clearly not been back as quickly as Russell Martin first hoped. I would be very careful with that, but yeah, it's a boost to have him back because it just gives Rangers another option off the bench, at the very least.
And then yesterday, Chris Boyd, SunSport columnist, talking about how he wouldn't want to be the number 9 for Rangers just now. Does that just give you an indication of the trouble that that is facing the club just now?
Yeah, I think it just feeds into the way Rangers are playing just now and having trouble breaking teams down. There was a stat that flashed up on Sunday. I think the Rangers team out with Findlay Curtis. Findlay Curtis had 2 shots on goal, and the rest of the Rangers team had no shots on target in the second half. At one stage. Yeah, look, Rangers are struggling to break down the low block, if you want to call it that. They are struggling to get cohesion within the attacking play. You looked at the Pilsen game and you felt Rangers were really starting to click. Kasama, who's been really good, I think he's clearly been the best of all the new signings so far. Antman, and they need that focal point, that striker. But I think, as Chris Boyd was saying, if you're not creating chances, it's a bit of a thankless task. I know a lot of eyebrows were raised when Tello Asgard was the one to go and play as the number 9 against St Mirren. It didn't work. Look, that's an experiment that can't happen again. It just did not work. And it also says something. I think that's what Rangers fans, look, Russell Martin's under a lot of pressure just now and everything's been picked up on, but Rangers fans clearly angry that Rangers would go to St Mirren in a away game and play without a recognised striker. Probably tells you where Rangers are, but I think it's more about the style of play and everything, and I think whoever becomes the number 9, the established number 9, come the close of the transfer window, Rangers need to find a better way of playing to create chances for whoever that person is.
In the moment that Rangers kind of find themselves, does that maybe put off players out with the club maybe coming because they see the situation that Rangers are in at the moment?
Yeah, look, I always think you back yourself. These players will be at a level where they feel they can go and make an impact. Whoever Rangers are going to sign in the final week of the window, you would imagine they're coming from, they're making a step up to go to Rangers, so it's a better move for them, both football and financially, or it's someone with a point to prove, someone maybe younger who's at a bigger club who's want to come and loan or whatever. So I don't really think players get too caught up in the craziness, if you want to call it that, of Scottish football. Rangers have already signed, 11 players so far. They're going to have, at the very worst, Europa League football, Europa League group stage football. They will be competing for trophies. Whether the league is gone or not, probably Sunday will make a big, we'll know more by Sunday in terms of that. But no, look, it's still an attractive option for so many players across Europe. You know, Rangers won't have any trouble attracting players, no matter how they're playing just now. I suppose the bigger issue is Russell Martin and how he gets through this period of uncertainty, you'd maybe call it. But I would imagine that the Rangers board, although there's so much noise just now, and I understand a lot of it, and I would have concerns looking at the way Rangers are playing and some of the stuff that's coming out. I think the Rangers board will hold firm. I don't really see any change in terms of Russell Martin being under pressure anytime soon.
So he could be 9 points behind if Celtic win, and you still don't think?
I just think it's far too early, and I get the, you know, if it's going down the wrong route, and I can understand why Rangers fans are saying I don't see any signs of play. Look, I understand all that and I agree with a lot of it. I just feel that if you are going to go all in on a manager, you're going to make so many changes, and Rangers are still trying to get players out, and he spoke about uncertainty the other day. You know, key guys like Igamane, what's going to happen with Nico Raskin, what's happening with Dessers. You're trying to rebuild a team, you're trying to get value for money. There's so much going on, and then you add on top of that, you've got a game every 3 days, and you've got other players trying to settle. I can understand why there's serious concerns about Russell Martin, but I think the talk of just sacking him just now and just getting rid of him, I just think it's so premature. You know, to me, you can't go all in and then after 2 months just decide, well, we're just going to leave it. I think Rangers need to get this international break in. Look, Bruges is huge, Celtic's clearly huge. Get to the international break. You've got 2 weeks then, you know what your squad is, there's no uncertainty anymore. And I think at that stage, everything will settle down. And look, see, beyond that, Rangers, I think, play Hearts and Hibs in quick succession. Europe will then start. Maybe the conversations for that. But the idea that you could, you know, sack Russell Martin after 60, 70 days, to me is crazy. I think it doesn't send out the right signals at all for Rangers in a kind of a real new era and a kind of revolution, for want of a better word, under the American owners. As I said, I'll say it again, I understand the concerns and I agree with a lot of what's going on in terms of Rangers' style of play, signings, Russell Martin's kind of ability to look. It's golden for us in terms of quotes and stuff like that, but I think he's talking himself into kind of problems at times with some of the things he says. However, he's new to the job. There's so many new players. I just think Rangers need to give it time. Look, I'll revisit this, or we can revisit this in a month or two down the line, but I think for people to be talking about it right now, to me, it's crazy.
Well, Rangers fans, you can let us know in the comments below what you think and whether Rangers should bullet Russell Martin or stick with him and see how he goes. One of the names being linked with Rangers is striker Bojan Miłowski. Obviously, he was at Aberdeen, scored plenty of goals. Is he the type of player that would fit? You know, the
100%. I'd be all over it if I was Rangers. I think he's a very good player. He can do a bit of both. He can go in behind. He's good at linking the play. Good experience. Knows Scottish football inside out. Has a good record here. I think he's the type of player who, if you look at what Russell Martin in the past has got his teams playing like, he's not obviously Rangers playing like it so far. I think he's a kind of ideal striker for him. I just think he's a very classy striker. It's not happened for him at Girona. Difficult season last season. Listen, that's no disgrace. It's a step up going to La Liga. To me, Bojan Miłowski, whether it's loan or permanent, I would actually try and make it permanent. I think he's a no-brainer of a signing. To me, I would be all over it and try and get it done as quickly as possible.
Another name, Youssef Chermiti from Everton. We don't know. Do you know too much about him?
No, I'm not going to be as optimistic.
Yeah.
To me, if you're Bojan Miłowski, ticks every box, go and sign him. Chermiti at Everton, I don't know. I'd be very, very sceptical about whether he, dare say, could make a contribution as a squad player. But Rangers need a number 9 to hang their hat on. They need someone who will be the main striker, or at the very least, you know, do the bulk of the hard work, sharing the load with someone. I think if it's a toss-up between Miłowski and Chermiti at Everton, you would go Miłowski every day of the week. He's not get. Look, he was signed, clearly a player of a lot of potential. Signed for what, £10 million, I think it was, rising. Everton clearly had high hopes for him. It's not really happened so far. I think he played 4 games last season, didn't score a goal for Everton. Clearly he's a player that needs to go and develop somewhere, but I don't think Rangers need another one of them. You know, I think Rangers have signed a lot of loans. We've spoke a lot about this in the shows, Craig, in terms of loans. I think Rangers at key areas of the pitch, centre forward and centre half just now, need a bit more experience. I think they need a bit more time served professionals. So for me, I wouldn't be going for a 21, 22-year-old with not a huge deal of first-team football behind him.
Yeah, Rangers have signed 11 players since the kind of opening of the transfer window. Are they any better off than they were when they started?
Look, time will tell, and that's what brings me back to the Russell Martin thing and the debate going on, and the real groundswell we feel of public opinion that he is really under pressure for his job. I just think it's too early to say, you know. Guys have come in and shown up really well in flashes, like Antman, and then he's been quiet. You know, we can all have discussions over whether Jayden McGohoma is better than Jeffrey, whether Max Arns is better than Tavernier. It's very, very early. I think you need to wait until the end of the window, look at the squad as a whole, let Rangers get the rest of their business done, because I still think, Craig, they probably need another left back, because it's quite hard to ask young McGohoma to go and play a full season. He's only 19. You need a centre half. I think Russell Martin spoke about wanting an experienced centre half. He was after Conor Cody for almost the entire summer, didn't get him. He still needs an experienced centre half. I think he'll want another winger. Jezero Naksaki obviously was one who he was very, very keen on, and a striker. And that's before anybody else leaves. You know, you do wonder, you're going to get late bids for Raskin and stuff like that. So, look, I do think Rangers need experience in certain areas, and only then, once you get the squad together, once things settle down a little bit, then I think you can make a clearer verdict on whether the Rangers are better off right now. As things stand, I can understand why people say no, but I just think it's too early to make a valid opinion.
One of the big moves out of Ibrox was Jeffrey for £6.5 million. Is that maybe one of the best deals of the window so far?
Yeah, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, and I'd said that, look, if the money was what it's been talked about, you would take it. I think he was a player of potential. I think he was a guy who had a lot more to go, and look, the attributes were there. However, I think at Rangers, you know, the stage of the player trading model they're at, for a guy they brought in for a pretty minimal fee to get that money for him, and I know some of the money will go elsewhere in terms of sell-ons, etc. Look, I think it's good business. I don't think he was a player Russell Martin really was, I'm not saying overly keen to keep. I think he would have kept him within the squad. He's obviously played him a bit more in recent weeks. I don't think he was going to stand in his way. Yilmaz as well. So yeah, that made sense. But you need to go and get proper replacements for two, because the Max Arns thing at left back hasn't worked either. So I think Rangers, having let Robbie Fraser go, three left backs have gone. Obviously Ben Davies is away now as well, who could have potentially played there too. So Rangers need to get in more cover at that area.
And yeah, we were touching on defenders there, and we're hearing there's a SunSport exclusive this morning about Bournemouth's defender Chris Mepham.
Yeah, and as I was speaking earlier on about Conor Cody, and that kind of player that Rangers are looking for, to me Chris Mepham fits the bill. 27 years old, 49, 50 Wales caps, huge experience, Premier League and Championship. I think he was in Sunderland on loan last season. So yeah, you would imagine he would fit the bill as an experienced centre half, the kind that Russell Martin has been speaking about. Sorry, Craig, and look, he is one who, if you can get him on a cut price deal, I think he's only got a year left in his contract just now. Again, I think it's one that Rangers would probably look to do, and I think it would certainly be, judging by his CV and his experience, an upgrade on what is maybe there in terms of Manny Fernandes, maybe one that Manny Fernandes clearly a player for the future, but could learn a bit more from. So yeah, I can understand why Russell Martin is looking at Mepham.
And important, given that it wouldn't be a loan deal as well, because they've already got 3 in the books.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was a loan deal, he's only got a year left in his deal, so you would obviously you'd probably be loaning with the obligation to buy down the line. Yeah, it's clearly a club in an area that Russell Martin has looked closely at. If you look at Joe Rothwell, you look at Max Arns, and then Chris Mepham as well. But look, that's a market he knows. I can understand why maybe some Rangers fans thinking, do you get value in the Championship and all that sort of stuff? Because I dare say his wages would be high as well. But with the way Rangers are just now and how open they've been, and defensively, Russell Martin's made it clear he needs leaders, he needs guys with experience, then you can understand why that's the kind of profile he's looking for.
Okay, David, thanks so much for your time this morning, and thank you to you for watching at home. Don't forget to hit like and smash that subscribe button on the Scottish SunSport YouTube channel, and of course you can keep up to date on all the latest transfer news and gossip across all Sun platforms.